Good morning, everybody. Welcome to your Rangers Review morning briefing. It is Friday, the 7th of November, the morning after the night before at Ibrox. Yet another defeat. To join me to look back on the game, Joshua Barry, who was at Ibrox last night. How goes it, Joshua?
Yeah, it's fine, Derek. I was at Ibrox and more of the same. Really more of the same. Can rarely remember so many Thursday nights that have been as flat as that in a long time. And yeah, I think Rangers are I think they're in a bad shape. They're in a bad situation, and there's a lot for us to get into. Danny Rule brought some early positivity. He's not the architect of this, but I think his events off the pitch as well demonstrated last night. This isn't going to be turned quickly, is it?
No, it is not. Before we delve in, a quick word for our podcast sponsors, Willows Fencing, the Glasgow-based fencing company you can trust and proud partners of the Rangers Review. They've got over 20 years of experience in the fencing trade. They offer free consultations and 10% off if you use the code Rangers Review over on the website, which is willows-fencing.com. Right, let's get to it then. Rangers losing by 2-0. 2 goals coming in the first half. The first from a set piece, a corner. Rangers again failing to pick up men. Boy at the back post sliding in Sully to open the scoring after 13 minutes. Goal number 2 came from a long ball over the top. Suter loses the big Ukrainian striker. He lays it off to Pellegrini and he side foots it into the back of the net. Fortunately, I mean, Rangers huffed and puffed, certainly in the second half. They got themselves into good positions at points, but fluffed their lines, as is the norm. And Roma, you've got to say, took their foot off the gas, thankfully, or else it could have been an uglier defeat. That's now, just trying to think, you were speaking 7 defeats in Europe, Joshua?
7 defeats in a row. Rangers had set a record in January for the longest unbeaten run. I think I'm right in saying that, of a Scottish club in Europe.
Yeah.
They now have if they lose against Braga, that'll be 8 defeats, and losing against Braga is, you've got to say, as we're speaking this morning, that seems much more likely than anything else happening, Derek. And if they lose against Braga, it will be a record for Scottish club losing in Europe 8 games in a row. That tells you this is a team, Derek, that even when they've been bad domestically, and they have been bad domestically, they got 77 points last season. They still reached the Europa League quarterfinals 2 seasons in a row. Rangers at the moment are joint bottom, the bottom of the table. They scored 1 goal, and it's a run of fixtures that teams in years gone by would have picked up a good amount of points from. But last night, Roma, they were in second gear for most of that, weren't they? I know Rangers got into some decent shooting positions in the second half, but the way that Roma almost scored those 2 goals, they turned up for half an hour and then they were able to just get through the rest of the game. And how fitting I think it was for where Rangers are, that it was that easy for them.
Yeah. Benfica put them out last 16. It was the year before last, but they should have the game when everyone was in the Benfica penalty area and it was just Ridvan that was back. That's how Rangers lost that game at Ibrox. But I long for those nights when Rangers could compete, because Roma had the kid gloves on yesterday. It looked, I said it last night on the show, it looked like almost a Rangers B team coming up against a senior side last night, and it really highlighted the recruitment failings that have set Rangers back a considerable amount of time. For me, Ali McCoist said on TNT last night that it's probably going to take about 3 transfer windows to sort this out. Certainly not going to be fixed in the January window, and it certainly won't be fixed if Kevin Thelwell has anything to do with it either. That is a big concern, and no surprise to see the supporters taking aim at both he and Patrick Stewart last night, Joshua.
It was toxic, Derek, and I think for much of the season, obviously, it's been directed towards Russell Martin, but there's so much anger, and I think boys run on apathy last night as well, which you can't blame people for, because since the takeover happened in May, can you name me one really positive night or evening or game? And that's the issue, is that this was supposed to, for people. There was a comment Russell Martin made at one point about this being a blank slate, and it was one of many tone deaf comments that failed to to understand the context that this is a support base, this is a group of fans who've been watching an underperforming team for the best part of 2 decades, spare one season here or a European run there. And part of the reason there was such optimism about this takeover, and listen, it's still relatively early in it, but part of the reason there was such optimism is it was supposed to mark the end, really, of off-pitch drama, wasn't it? It was supposed to mark the end of what Rangers had this time last year, which was no chairman and no CEO and no sporting director, and only really Philippe Clement and Niels Kopp, and it left at the helm of the club. Obviously, Clement was kind of the footballing figurehead because there was no one else around them. The takeover is supposed to mark the end of that. Can you say that Rangers are any more stable in terms of the feeling of the club, the results, the type of scenes you see last night? Because this time last year, Derek, they had no CEO, no, as I say, no sporting director. There was a whole interim structure. But I don't think things seemed more unstable externally. Certainly, you had a couple of walkouts at Ibrox and you had protests. We can't rewrite history. But the level of animosity that is gathered towards figures this season isn't something that we've really seen that often in recent years. And I know we're going to come on to talk about recruitment, and I think that is the conversation to have after a game like last night. But just to highlight, and I'll put this in the piece that goes out on the website today. If you look at the underlying numbers, the expected goals difference, Rangers are second bottom. They're 35 out of 36. They are where they are supposed to be, right at the bottom of this Europa League table. And again, for a team that has been so impressive in Europe for so many years, even when they've underperformed in the league, that kind of just rubs salt in the wound of a season that, as I say, has produced so few nights, games, evenings that have been worth watching so far for Rangers supporters, I think.
Yeah. 4 defeats out of 4 in this group against teams that, let's be honest, Rangers would be swatting aside. Even last season's gone by. Even last season, I think they don't lose that game against Roma. They would have at least picked up a point. But the drop-off is so alarming. It's unreal. You mentioned there about the takeover. It's been, let's be honest, it's been disastrous. There's been nothing positive I can think off the top of my head that's been achieved since they've came in, which is quite something. And just on McCoist, folks, if you missed what he said about the transfers yesterday, says forget one window, it might be 3. He said, first of all, it's not the best window. The January window is not the best window. That is the first thing you've got to say. And then you got to balance it, because you've got to balance the books and get some of them going in the opposite direction. Nowadays, that is easier said than done. That man, who I speaks very, very well, talked about Danny Rule, I think should and will get a good opportunity and hopefully get a few windows, because I like the sound of him. I think he clearly knows the game, and I genuinely hope he will get the opportunity, but it'll take more than one window, because that is a big, big job. So that is what Ali McCoist had to say on it. Can't disagree with him on that one. During commentary, he was mentioning the physicality in the team. I know Danny Rule was quizzed about that in his post-match press conference as well. Rangers have just recruited really, really badly at this point in time. I don't know where to start with this, Joshua, because there's so many gaps and failings all over the pitch. The only player that I'd be quite happy with at this point in time is Jack Butland, I've got to say. But the rest, I mean, James Tavernier there as well. I know he comes in for criticism, but other than that, it's going to be a really tough window, because as McCoy says there, you're going to have to offload a lot of these guys, and who's going to buy underperforming players?
Yeah, Danny Rule's almost like he's almost felt like a sideshow last night, and I'm not saying that to discredit him, but people can see the situation that he inherits, and I think people can see that he's made good first impressions, but as 5 managers in 4 years or whatever it is before him, or I think he's the 5th in 4 years, depicts a manager's not a silver bullet when things around him in the club are not functioning well. I asked you before we came on today, who do Rangers have that as a sellable asset? And they have a number of youngish players, okay, but for the fees they have paid, it is going to be difficult to flip players. So Jeji Gisama, who you brought in for near enough $2.5 million, he's been a bit off the boil. And ironically, I don't think he's been helped, Derek, by the fact that He's had to cover so many different positions. He's had to play in the right because Rangers haven't had a solution there. He's had to play at right wing back because they've had to change shape to try and make something work. I don't think that's helped his form rather than just playing off the left consistently. But it's a conversation we've had for a long, long time, isn't it? That they didn't sign a spine to the squad this summer. And even last season, when Rangers had such a poor domestic campaign, I think to find Igaman and Jeffrey in one summer, sign them for low fees and flip them, it demonstrates a model that could have been effective long term. Rangers signed, if you look at their defence last night, all of them are out of contract or going back to their parent clubs at the end of this season. That's not sustainable. If you look at the money spent on Manny Fernandez to play only 2 games in a defence that clearly needed someone to build around. If you look at the over-reliance on James Tavernier, who was dropped for those big Champions League qualifiers and then predictably has to play every single minute of every single game, remains Rangers' most important player. And I think you could see that on the pitch on Sunday. You look at Joe Rothwell, who was brought in to be someone to build around in the midfield, has started 3 of 11 games since that night in Bruges. We've talked to death about the striking position, but you look at the money spent on Yusuf Chermiti and you think Rangers needed him to be a game changer, develop, and here is so difficult. And for the outlay on the likes of Chermiti, Antman, Fernandez, that's a lot of money to spend. Derek, and you just needed 3 or 4 players. It's all very well if you had a spine of the squad that was working, but you're now just relying on a spine of the squad that hasn't been able to take you where you want to before, hasn't been able to win the league before, and is now a year older, with contracts up in the air, with one more year of difficulties to deal with at Ibrox. And that's kind of where I stand on it. I look at right across the team and I think who would get in it from last season. I think Cyril Dessers would. I think Hams Igaman would. I think Václav Černý.
Balogun,
Chefty, Ridvan, and even someone like Yanis Hadji. And how many positions have Rangers upgraded compared to last season? I think it's, apart from Gassam, I think it's very hard to say any. And that's the core issue for me, because Danny Rule can be the most astute tactician in the world. Sometimes maybe we overplay the influence of managers. It is down to players on the pitch, isn't it? And at the moment, there's a real vacuum, which means you go back and rely on Tavernier and Raskin and Suter and Butland, who probably remain Rangers' four most important players in terms of the minutes they're playing. They so clearly needed a new spine this summer. And as I say, you've got the likes of Fernandez and Antman on the bench last night. Asgard only coming off the bench last night. It's too much money spent for the return that has been offered up at the moment.
Yeah, it's frightening. Blue Nose Sparky says, sellable assets, Sama, Raskin and Diamandi, the only 3, I think. So that's his point on that incident. I'd be looking to offload Raskin in January. His contract situation has been going under the radar as the games pass by. And he's been off the boil. If they can get good money in for him in January, then I'd be listening to that. That's for sure. Chris Dykes with a point, and he's very kindly donated to the channel. Thank you, Chris. The 2 basics any Rangers side should have is fight and quality. This side, considering the money spent, is so far away from both that it's embarrassing. It is embarrassing, Chris. You're absolutely bang on with that. They've brought in players that just don't have the wherewithal to be Rangers players, hence why the Van Ayer has been aimed at the guy who is in charge of transfers. I don't think he's acutely aware of what is required at this club, and that's not even getting to the fact of the disastrous managerial appointment and the audacity to appoint his own son as part of the recruitment team. And you'd imagine things are underway behind the scenes, as every club pretty much, even though the transfer window closes, work is taking place for 2-3 windows down the line. So you'd imagine they'll be well down in terms of scouting, trying to identify players to come in. But as McCoist said, 3 windows. Just how many players do you bring in? You mentioned defence there, Joshua. I've said it before. They need a whole new back line. You can't get a whole new back line in January, can you? So
no, sorry, there. But you're still relying on James Tavernier, and I increasingly as the season goes on, I think that the narrative around Tavernier shows he's made mistakes. Of course, he has at times not lived up to expectation. But I think he has witnessed the demise of the club since 2021 internally, and the reliance on him every year as he gets older. This time last year, Philippe Clement was taking him off against Lyon after 60 minutes. It looked like Casemiro and Sterling were going to have that right back slot. How can it be that as a club a year on, you're putting so much reliance on a player who you should be sort of rotating in and out, keeping fresh, using them to his strengths, but they don't have that luxury because of how much cover is needed across the back line, because Max Aarons is having to cover at left back because Rangers only signed one left back, who I think is a good player, Jayden Magoma, and I think Mikey Moore's a good player, but they're still developing. And any player who's still developing won't really be consistent. And I think a lot of weight was put on the fact when Russell Martin was appointed that he had the 6 months or 5 months experience playing up here, and people in the building knew him and liked him. And okay, there's you can see the logic in that to a degree. But rather than lessons in 2018 from a player who came here on loan for 6 months, you needed to learn the lessons of previous seasons. Now, Andrew Kavanagh himself, I think, said on a couple of occasions, correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, but I believe he said that they've underestimated at times the size of the club and perhaps the size of the job. I think I'm right in saying that. And you look at, as I say, the lessons of the last couple of years, the players that have struggled to develop here. We've made this point in recent podcasts, but Malik Tillman, Fabio Silva, Amad Diallo, players who I would argue are better than the Yusuf Chermiti and maybe Mikey Moore within that conversation. It's just difficult to develop here, even if you are an absolutely elite young prospect, because of the demands, because of the expectation, and because you don't have this raft of senior players who have won a load before and can kind of take the weight off. And that's why, for me, you needed to go out and rather than spending that money on, Fernandes and Chermiti and Antman, players who might come good, and Antman's another topic because he's just not played that much. You needed certainty, and the players who you did recruit with a bit of certainty, Joe Rothwell on a 3-year contract, haven't been able to do it. And the thing with loans, Derek, is short-term loans need to make an impact now. It's fine if you've got a Václav Černý who does make an impact now, but they cost you and you don't benefit from them financially in the long term. It's not as if clubs just give you the player for a year and say, look after him and we'll see you next year. There's a loan fee. With a lot of these players, Rangers are paying a very healthy portion of their wages. Their wage bill is much higher than it was last season. So I don't think it's someone like Jayden Magoma's fault who was poor last night, because he should not be relied upon to play this much football for this club so early when he'd only had one real loan before. And he was really good, I thought, against Hibs, and he was good against Kilmarnock. But that's the point. Can you do it 4 or 5 games in a row in such a short period of time when you've got a cup final? It's difficult for any 19-year-old, I would argue, let alone some of the best in the world, and arguably players of higher quality who've struggled to develop here in recent years.
Yeah, the left-back situation this summer infuriated me. That is a failing of the sporting director to just lose 3 left-backs and bring in 1 academy graduate and someone that's a baby in footballing terms and stick him in there. Just unacceptable. The point came in just when you mentioned Mikey Moore, King Charles Spaniel as a fan. He says, I like Mikey Moore. He always takes people on and always goes forward. He was in the mix zone last night. So I just read you a quick word of what he had to say. He said, I need to start helping the team to win with more goals and assists. I think in my play I've been a bit better, but I need to start showing that in my numbers as well. I knew that it was going to be big pressure. I think that's why I chose it. I didn't come up here not knowing that. I didn't think I wasn't going to be that way. I didn't think it was going to be easy for me. So yeah, I'm prepared to go through with this. We need to start picking up points and building momentum. We can't write it off now. We've got enough quality in the team and enough good players to start winning. We need to keep winning. That's all for now. We need to start building game by game, and it starts on the weekend. He has improved since Danny Rule has come in. In fact, he referenced him, Danny Rule, in his press conference as well. One of the players that has improved. But again, Rangers need more, don't they?
He has improved and he's been better. But it's taken him till November, in part because he played all these different positions. He came on at like left back away at Livingston, started on the right wing. As a player developing, if Mikey Moore comes into a Rangers squad that's winning, that's playing well, he maybe has a month or so of coming off the bench in one position, Derek, and getting up to speed. But when you very quickly say, "Oh, can you provide all the solutions to this club that has not been, has won like one title in the last 14 years?" You pay for your over-reliance, I think, in the wrong circumstances. Which again, I will bore myself by making this same repeated point, but I think unless any Rangers side, especially one who needs to overcome a lot of barriers, has 3 or 4 or 5 players that you can rely upon, regardless of who the manager, the head coach, the tactical approach, the type of players that when it's getting embarrassing in Bruges away, pull the team together and change things on the park. I was listening to, I can't remember what podcast it was this week. I was talking about the Liverpool game against, who are Liverpool playing at the weekend? Aston Villa. But so a higher bar than Rangers, okay. But I was talking about something Van Dijk did in the game where he was meant to be tracking Morgan Rogers, and he didn't want to go that far up the pitch because he likes to stay back. So he made an alteration himself, put Robertson in there, and he started to pick up another man. Tiny example, and I'm sure Rangers players are obviously capable of doing that. Again, so often I think we can look at someone like Danny Rule and his tactical approach can make a difference. It did in the couple of games in the Scottish Premiership after he arrived. But you live or die, I think, by the leadership that you have on the pitch, the decisions you make, the responsibility that can be assumed. And that's why that not signing those 3 or 4 players to build around in the summer has been so detrimental. Maybe some of these players will be that in the future, but you need to be it now to allow others to develop and to give your project a bit of a head start, which head start is far from what's happened here this season, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been dreadful. Bluebells are blue, kind of donated to the channel. Thank you, sir. Says, Josh, is there anything you're aware of on Cornelius that he can't seem to play 2 games straight? Surely he starts last night, baffling. Yeah, I thought it was a bit of a surprise seeing him drop to the bench and Nasser Giga keeping his place in the team, perhaps with one eye on Sunday.
I think he had a bit of a knock. So if you look at the end of the game against Celtic at the weekend, he was down in extra time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
We spoke in a pre-match show about the fact that 10 men had played for nearly 90 minutes with extra time, Derek. So I would imagine it was just that because he was on the bench, but perhaps carrying just a bit of a knock because of the fact he was holding his. I don't know if it was his hamstring or his quad, but he definitely went down in extra time of that game at the weekend.
Yeah. Sunday then, Dundee. They've recently beaten Celtic up there quite convincingly. They were very unfortunate not to take all 3 points at Ibrox earlier on in the season. Do you make changes for this? I'm looking at the team last night. I was thinking about this last night. I would be making big alterations. For a start, I've seen images of Clinton Enciala in the training pictures. I'd be throwing him in, incidentally. I think it was Dens Park, wasn't he? He made his debut. He was thrust in due to injuries. He's playing for me at the back, either left back or left centre back. I'd probably play the 2. Cornelius comes back in for me as well. Giga drops out to Tav on the right-hand side. Midfield, I'd be bringing Leo Cameron back in against his former club. I'd have Connor Barron in there as well. Perhaps Nico Raskin up front, Danilo, and Finlay Curtis for me. I'd be making wholesale alterations. Do you think? I don't expect him to do that. I expect him to go with Danny Rule with much the same sort of players as we've seen of late. But can you see him doing anything drastic, Joshua, for this game?
Can I see him doing anything drastic? He has to change something up top, really, at the moment, doesn't he? Chermiti, I thought, won a few flick-ons and he worked hard and he, and I do feel for him because he's not decided this transfer fee. But again, when you cost this much money, there is going to be an expectation that you basically score every game.
What do you make of him last night? What do you make of it? He had a couple of chances. He flashed one across the face, of course, first half. Second half, he hit the advertising holdings when he was put in. He was sort of stretching for it.
I think the one you mentioned there, the second half, that shows a player who's lacking confidence because he actually has the time. I was watching it back this morning and he has the time probably to get it back on his favoured right foot or turn a bit. And it's a good run. And behind him, he makes a good run. He times it well, but he snatches at it and can't get across the goalkeeper and it looks like a bad miss. And the crowd were frustrated at that one. The opportunity in the first half, I thought he was unlucky because it was a narrow angle. But again, the conversation around him will always be, he'll always have the cost associated. That's just the nature of it, Derek, especially when the kind of ready now option in Bojan Miovski hasn't played that much. I still think that if you look at that striking position, Cyril Dessers gives Rangers more than what they've got at this moment in time with the faults that he had. We saw them last time he went to Dundee when he, what was it, 10 chances he missed, but he got 10 chances, and it's an underrated skill of strikers to generate shooting opportunities for themselves. So I expect maybe you'll see Bojan Miovski up there, but I think at the moment Danny Rule wants Chermiti as a kind of physical outball to play up to. I'd keep Mikey Moore in there. I'd probably keep Gassam in there too, even though he goes a little bit hot and cold, just because I think he looks like the only one who's unpredictable and can properly beat a man and has a turn of pace. But then you're looking at it and thinking, well, Jayden McGomez played a lot of football in recent weeks. But if you don't play him at left wing back, then your shape's a bit all over the place, isn't it? Because you're playing like a right back and Max Aarons potentially at left wing back. Or do you flip your shape, which we saw Danny Rule do in the second half, to be fair to him, and play a wide player there. We've not seen much of Oliver Antman whatsoever. He started that game in Brann, but hasn't been seen since under Rule. So I agree with you. I'd like to see someone like Lyle Cameron given an opportunity, although he's only rarely been involved in squads so far. And who else? It's not as if you've got a ton of people that merit an opportunity, but I tweeted out the other night that I'd like to see Finlay Curtis get more game time purely because he has the third highest number of goal scorers for Rangers this season, and he's hardly played. He scored that goal against Panathinaikos, 2 important goals off the bench against Alloa and St Mirren. I think if you're Finlay Curtis sitting in the dressing room at the moment, if you committed your long-term futures to the club, you could be justified in thinking that you deserve a little bit more of an opportunity. Obviously, he did come on last night, but be interesting to see domestically when there's still stuff to play for if he does get more of a look in.
Yeah. Incidentally, Desser's got the same amount of goals as Yusuf Chermiti this season, 1. So there you go.
I think he's been injured as well, hasn't he? But he wasn't a, by no means.
I mean, at Rangers, he scored 1 at Rangers.
All right. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know that. But he was no perfect player, was he, Derek? Although Rangers over relied on him. We spoke about him so often, but you know, you're looking at the goals of, I know Chris wrote about this early in the week, Cherney on the right and Egeman and Dessers together, and for the Cherney went for a not dissimilar price to the likes of Antman this summer. And Rangers are missing a lot of goals, which is why someone like Curtis, I think, comes into the equation. It's why Danilo has come back in, because they need goals from somewhere. Miovski is probably more likely to get them than Chermiti, but I think that Rule is picking Chermiti just because Rangers can then play directly to him, which gives them a bit of an outball.
Yeah. Lots of comments coming in just on Curtis and Cameron needing game time, and Enciala, some looking for Enciala to come back in. I would be surprised if that was the case, but I think he deserves a crack. He can't be any worse than what's currently been served up. So there you go. Incidentally, just a heads up, folks, before we wrap up for today. Well, first of all, you mentioned that the fans, fantastic tifo before the game, Joshua. That was one of the best tifos I think I've ever seen. And fair play to Danny Rule for helping out with the Union Bears on that as well. That was fantastic. That is up there alongside, I think, maybe even eclipses the soonest one last season. Do you have any favourite tifos that you've seen at Ibrox?
My favourite, and this was also before an underwhelming game, so it does not live long in the memory, but before Rangers' Old Firm game against sorry, it's my phone. Against Old Firm game, the game Beale lost 1-0 and Roof had that goal that was chopped off. I think it was Roof, wasn't it? And there was the tifo in the Broomlin. I think it was the first time that the pulley had been used that has now been transferred over to the Copeland. And it was I think it was All My Sons Will Be Like Me was across the bottom.
Yeah.
And the dad with his son on his shoulders. That was up there for me. But last night was very impressive. And the atmosphere was great for about 10 minutes. But then Roma were just like experienced. They kept dropping players into their back line, so Rangers couldn't really press them. And physically, you're right, physically the difference in size between the two teams, which shows at set pieces, but also just in open play. I thought was really stark. So, unfortunately, the tifo didn't really generate any sort of commanding atmosphere. But that was up there with that one in the Old Firm game a couple of years ago for me.
Yeah, Bruno Sparks says, do you see the banners, Derek Kavanagh? Yeah, we've seen the banners as well, Derek. And Kavanagh needs to be careful. The longer he keeps Thirlwell and Stewart in situ, then I'd imagine that the ire will be directed at him. So that is a one to keep an eye on.
The banners, and again, I was speaking to Chris about this in the car home last night. Chris has been doing this a lot longer than me, and I was saying to him, do you remember this sort of negativity towards lots of different figures at the club, apart from kind of in the war years where there was much more serious issues to discuss? And last night there was banners unfurled in the Sandy Jardine stand that then there's banners and I think in the Broomlin as well, but the banners unfurled in kind of the top deck, Derek, some stewards were trying to take them away. It's not the steward's fault. They're just kind of there doing a job, aren't they? And they're instructed by someone else to do it. But then they got grabbed by fans in the lower stand of the Sandy Jardine. So again, it's one of these games at Ibrox where what's happening off the pitch seems to impact things more than on it. And I go back to the point I made at the top of the show. I think this summer, part of the reason there's this emotion around it at the moment, this summer was supposed to mark the end of off-pitch things dominating. It was supposed to be a professional job off the pitch, and then you can just focus on the football. But we've spent hardly any time. Last week was a rare week on the Rangers Review where we actually talked about football.
I know, incredible.
Here's what Danny Rule's doing, and but apart from that, it's just constant club stretching from one crisis to the next, and it's a long old season, Derek, and it's only November.
Yeah, it's hard work. Mr. Big Bertie says the tifo before Leipzig. Yeah, that was a good one. And Alex Kelly says the tifo and the Queen's passing to defy UEFA and the rendition of God Save the Queen was spine-tingling. I think that was a Napoli game, if I'm not mistaken, Alex. But you're quite right. That was fantastic. A big thank you as well to John for the donation. He says, why on earth did we have to squeeze the wage bill down last year to ramp it back up this year with draws? And he says, the will's out. So that's him making his point on that one. I'm sure you're not alone in that, John. Right, heads up. Jack Butland is actually speaking to the press now. So we'll get that up for you on the YouTube channel as soon as possible, folks. Those of you that are Rangers Review Extra members, we haven't managed to record our Q&A this week, so we'll record that today. I'll pop the request out for questions on the community page. Send them in. I'm sure it's going to be another bumper show. So we'll record that around about 1 o'clock as usual. If we don't speak to you, then thank you very much.
We'll have sorry, I should add, Derek, we'll have our usual Saturday morning show. Johnny's making the trek into the office for this one, so yeah, I know, indeed. So people can watch that tomorrow morning, and please, it's not a good day to ask for this, but liking and subscribing helps us do more and more videos. Hopefully we have some football to talk about someday.
We live in hope. Okay, folks, enjoy your Friday, whatever you're up to, and we'll chat again soon. Bye for now.